Hey everyone, want to know how to use the power of the sun to battle those pesky garden invaders?
It's easier than you might think.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into soil solarization, and believe me, it's way more interesting than it sounds.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
We're checking in with the pros over at the University of California's Integrated Pest Management Program. They've got this awesome online guide full of research-based tips for gardeners of all levels. Think of this deep dive as a shortcut to understanding exactly how soil solarization works, its benefits, and yeah, any potential downsides too.
Absolutely. We'll cover all that.
By the time we wrap up, you'll know for sure if soil solarization is the right move for your garden or landscape. So what's so awesome about this technique is that it uses something we kind of take for granted, the sun's energy,
Yeah.
and it turns it into like this secret weapon for dealing with garden pests naturally.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, remember using a magnifying glass to fry ants when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah.
It's like that, but way more effective. And, no ants were harmed in the making of this deep dive.
Right.
Instead of ants, we're talking about things like fungus, bacteria, those nematodes, even weed seeds, all those things that can make a gardener's life miserable.
Exactly. It can be a real pain.
All right, so how does it work? Tell me the secrets.
So imagine this. You've got your garden, right?
Yeah.
You cover the soil with clear plastic, like you're building a mini greenhouse. The plastic traps the heat, and it sends the soil temperature soaring. I'm talking up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
Whoa, that's hot. I can barely handle that in a parked car.
Right. And most garden pests can't take the heat either. That intense heat creates an environment where those pests just can't survive.
So it's like a reset button for your soil.
Exactly.
So it's not just about getting rid of those immediate threats. It's also about creating a healthier environment for your plants in the long term, right?
You got it. And that's what's so cool about this. The UCIPM guide really emphasizes that soil solarization doesn't just deal with pests. It actually makes your soil healthier in the process.
Really? Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me more about that. So you're telling me that heating up the soil can actually make it healthier. How does that work?
Basically, think of it like this. When the soil heats up, it actually breaks down organic matter much faster, kind of like composting, but way faster.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And this process releases a bunch of nutrients, making them easier for your plants to absorb. It's kind of like giving your soil a super nutritious boost.
So not only are you getting rid of the bad stuff, but you're also giving your plants the best possible food. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Are there any other advantages?
Oh, yeah. One of the biggest benefits that the guide highlights is how good it is for the environment.
Okay, that makes sense.
With soil solarization, you're not using any harsh chemicals or anything like that in your garden.
Right.
It's a totally natural process, so it fits right in with organic gardening practices.
That's a win-win for both the garden and the planet, right?
Exactly.
But like with anything else, I'm sure there's some things you need to think about before you just jump right in.
You're definitely right about that. It's not like a magic solution or anything. The guide does a really good job of pointing out some important considerations.
Okay, good.
For example, one thing it mentions is that solarization mostly affects the top layers of the soil, maybe about 6 to 12 inches deep.
Okay.
So if you have some really stubborn, deep-rooted weeds or pests that like to dig down deep, you might need to come up with a different plan to deal with those.
It's like you always have to be one step ahead of those pesky garden invaders.
Yeah, exactly. You got to know your enemy. What else? Oh, yeah. Where you are makes a big difference, too.
That makes sense.
Like soil solarization works best in places with lots of warm sunshine, places where it gets super hot,
Right, of course.
If you're gardening somewhere cooler, you might need to change your approach a bit, or maybe even combine solarization with some other techniques.
So it's all about adapting to your own climate and specific conditions.
Exactly.
Okay. Are there any other warnings from the experts? Anything else we need to watch out for?
Well, one last thing. Even though soil solarization is really effective, it's not a permanent solution,
Oh, really?
Yeah, some stubborn pests might try to make a comeback.
Oh, no.
We might have to repeat the process or maybe include other pest control methods to keep them under control.
So it's more like a really powerful tool to use rather than a one-time fix.
Exactly. It's about using soil solarization strategically alongside your regular gardening routine. But here's the good news. The guide has tons of practical advice to help you be successful with solarization.
Awesome. So you've convinced me. I'm going to give it a shot. Tell me everything. What are the expert tips? They cover everything from choosing the right type of plastic, spoiler alert, it's usually clear,
You got it.
To prepping your soil for maximum heat absorption. They even recommend using a soil thermometer to monitor those temperatures like a pro. Get really geeky with it.
It's science, baby.
Speaking of geeking out, I was fascinated by the part about choosing between clear and black plastic. I had no idea there was a strategic decision to be made there.
It's one of those things you don't really think about.
Right. It's one of those little details that can make a big difference. As the guide explains, clear plastic is generally the way to go because it lets those heat-generating rays pass through and get trapped in the soil. Think of it like a greenhouse roof.
Like a little solar panel.
Black plastic, on the other hand, while great at absorbing heat, can actually deflect some of it away from the soil surface.
Interesting.
So in most cases, clear plastic is the winner for maximizing that solar energy transfer.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. In cooler climates, where every degree counts, the guide suggests that black plastic might actually be the better option.
Oh, really?
Why? Because weed growth can be a concern in cooler temperatures. And using black plastic prevents those weeds from getting a head start, even if the soil heating isn't as intense.
Fascinating. So it's all about adapting your strategy based on your local climate, just like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And if you really want to crank up the heat, the guide suggests a double layer trick.
A double layer of plastic. Now you've got my attention. Tell me more.
It's surprisingly simple, but super effective. Basically, you layer your plastic like a thermal blanket for your soil.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Creating an air pocket between those two layers enhances the insulation effect, boosting those temperatures even further.
I love it. A cozy sauna for my soil, except the only ones sweating are the unwelcome pests. Okay, last question. I saw the term biosolarization in the guide and got super curious. What's that all about?
Oh, biosolarization is fascinating. It's like composting on steroids. Essentially, you incorporate organic matter, like compost or crop residues, into the soil before covering it with plastic.
So you're giving those heat-loving microbes an extra boost.
Exactly. As that organic matter breaks down, it releases natural byproducts that can further enhance the pest-suppressing effects. It's like giving your soil an extra dose of natural pest-fighting power.
This deep dive has been amazing. I'm ready to grab some clear plastic and a soil thermometer and get to work. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners before they embark on their sun-powered gardening journey?
The guide does a fantastic job of covering the practical how-to of soil solarization, but it got me thinking, how does this process impact the diversity of life in the soil? We're talking about the good microorganisms along with the potentially harmful ones. Does it just hit the reset button on the soil ecosystem, or are there longer-term shifts? It's something to ponder as we learn to garden in harmony with these complex underground worlds.
That's a brilliant point. It reminds us that even the most natural techniques can have a ripple effect, and understanding those complexities is all part of the adventure of gardening. Well, there you have it. We've explored the ins and outs of soil solarization, from its incredible pest-fighting power and soil-boosting benefits to some key considerations and those clever tips straight from the experts.
And we're just scratching the surface.
Don't forget to check out the full UC-IPM guide for even more details and guidance. It's a treasure trove of information.
For sure.
Now you've got the knowledge to decide if soil solarization is right for you. Remember, a little sunshine and some strategic planning can go a long way in creating a thriving, pest-resistant garden. Happy gardening.